Death at 20,000 feet does not smell of glory. It has none of the pageantry of a cavalry charge or the brutal intimacy of a bayonet fight in the mud. Death inside an Avro Lancaster of No. 6 Group, Royal Canadian Air Force in the spring of 1944, has a very specific scent. It is an olfactory cocktail of superheated hydraulic oil, burnt rubber, the acidic vomit of men sickened by turbulence, the chemical stench of the overflowing Elson portable toilets in the rear, and, above all, the smell of fear. Fear is not abstract here. It is a physical secretion, a cold, oily sweat that soaks the heavy wool of flight suits, freezing against the skin when the internal temperature of the fuselage drops to 30 degrees below zero. For Flight Lieutenant James Mac MacDonald, a former geography teacher from Saskatchewan, who is only 24, but has the sunken eyes of a 50-year-old coal miner, the war ceased to be a moral crusade a long time ago. It has become an industrial equation, a macabre accounting of tons of explosives delivered versus crews incinerated. MacDonald sits in the pilot's seat of the Lancaster V for vengeance, his gloved hands holding the yoke, with a lightness that belies the tension locking his jaw. The plane is not a graceful machine, it is a winged tractor, an aluminum shed filled with high-octane gasoline and unstable explosives, vibrating violently as it tears through the darkness over the North Sea. The vibration is constant. It loosens dental fillings. It numbs the buttocks. It makes the instrument needles dance as if possessed. And on this specific night, the mission they have been given feels, to every single one of the 7 men on board, like a sick joke conceived by a command that has lost touch with reality. They are not going to burn the bearing factories of Schweinfurt. They are not going to decapitate the industrial hydra of the Ruhr. They are going to bomb holes in the ground, airfields, concrete runways in occupied France and Belgium. The order came directly from Bomber Command headquarters, filtered through bureaucracy, but bearing the unmistakable signature of a strategic shift that the air crews hated viscerally. Arthur Harris, Bomber Harris, wanted to burn German cities to the ground. He believed in dehousing, in breaking civilian morale, but Eisenhower and the Allied Supreme Command had other ideas. The invasion was coming. D-Day was a whispered secret, a shadow on the temporal horizon. And for the invasion to work, the Luftwaffe had to be castrated, not just fought but nullified. The order was to attack the German aviation infrastructure, destroy the runways, smash the hangars. For men like Sergeant Thomas "Red" Campbell, MacDonald's navigator, a pragmatic man from Winnipeg who measured life in degrees of latitude and fuel consumption, this seemed like the definition of futility. We are risking a 40,000-pound aircraft and 7 lives to make potholes in a field that Jerry will fix with a bulldozer and quick-drying cement in 12 hours, he had muttered during the briefing, cigarette smoke creating a blue halo around his red head. And he wasn't wrong. Conventional wisdom in the decompression rooms and mess halls of the Yorkshire bases was that bombing airfields was a waste of bombers. It was trading gold for lead. It was sending elite crews, trained at an astronomical cost, to attack targets that, by the next morning, would be operational again. The feeling of being sacrificed for an idiotic strategy was a poison running through the veins of No. 6 Group. They felt like pawns in a game no one explained, thrown against the densest defenses in Europe for a tactical gain that seemed nil. But what Campbell, MacDonald, and the thousands of other Canadians flying that night did not know, what they could not know, was the nature of the monster waiting for them on the other side of the English Channel. They did not see the war from the point of view of Hauptmann Heinrich Vogel. Vogel was not in a smoky mess hall complaining about strategy. He was sitting in the cramped cockpit of a Junkers Ju-88 G6, a twin-engine night fighter parked on the readiness tarmac at Sint-Truiden, Belgium. Vogel was a predator, a technician of slaughter. At 26, he had 42 confirmed victories. He didn't call them murders. He called them Abschüsse, shoot-downs. For Vogel, the Canadian and British bombers were not manned by geography teachers or accountants. They were Möbelwagen, furniture vans, heavy, slow-laden vehicles moving in predictable queues, ready to be dismantled. The Luftwaffe, far from being defeated in the spring of 1944, had transformed. It had retracted, condensed its ferocity. They had developed the Zame Sao, tame boar system, where night fighters did not wait in fixed zones but infiltrated the bomber stream, swimming among the prey like sharks in a school of tuna. The Liechtenstein SN2 radar on the nose of Vogel's U-88 turned the impenetrable darkness into a screen of mathematical opportunities, and, most terrifying of all, Vogel had Schräge Musik, jazz music, 20mm cannons mounted in the fighter's fuselage, firing upwards at an oblique angle. Vogel didn't need to attack from behind where the Lancaster's tail gunners watched obsessively. He could slide underneath, into the absolute blind spot, invisible against the dark ground, and disembowel the bomber by firing into its fuel tanks and defenseless belly. It was an execution, not a combat. The tragic irony, the black core of this narrative, lies exactly in this disconnection. The Canadians believed they were being wasted on irrelevant targets. They thought attacking Runways was a strategic error that exposed them to death without purpose. They did not know that the bases they were going to attack were the nests of these very night wasps that were decimating them. They did not know that every crater on the runway at Sint-Truiden or Deelen or Juvincourt was the only thing that could keep Vogel and his killer brethren on the ground. The waste was, in fact, the only possible salvation. But history does not reveal its secrets to the participants in real time. It only demands its price in blood. And the price was about to be collected. MacDonald's Lancaster crosses the Dutch coast. The change is immediate and physical. The zone of silence over the sea ends. The sky, previously an indifferent void of cold stars, suddenly becomes a hostile, active environment. The fingers of German searchlights begin to grope the sky. They are not random beams. They are radar-controlled, guided by the Würzburg-Riese, giant parabolic dishes that track bomber formations with metric precision. When a searchlight catches a plane, it glows with a blue-white intensity that blinds. And then the other lights converge. The cone, the trap of light. A bomber caught in the cone is a flying corpse. It becomes the focal point for every flak 80mm battery within a 10-kilometer radius. Navigator to pilot, course correction 3 degrees starboard, Campbell's voice crackles over the intercom. The sound is metallic, distorted by static and the drone of the 4 Merlin engines. MacDonald obeys, moving the rudder pedals. The Lancaster groans. It is heavy. Loaded with a 4,000-pound cookie, a giant trash can full of amatol, and thousands of pounds of incendiaries. It is a mixed load, designed for synergistic destruction. The cookie blows open the buildings and runways. The incendiaries burn what's left. The tail gunner, Sergeant Junior Ross, a 19-year-old kid who lied about his age to enlist, breaks the radio silence. "Corkscrew starboard, go!" The scream is pure disciplined panic. MacDonald doesn't think. Training takes over. He throws the yoke to the right and pushes down. The 30-ton bomber dives into a nauseating spiral. Green tracers fly through the space where the cockpit was a second ago. Flak, anti-aircraft artillery. The black bursts appear out of nowhere, like malignant flowers blooming instantly. The sound of nearby flak isn't a boom. It's a dry cough followed by the sound of stones being thrown against a tin roof. Shrapnel. The Lancaster shudders. The smell of cordite enters the cabin, overpowering the smell of vomit. They are in death row. The Ruhr Valley might be Happy Valley, but the skies over the airfields of Belgium and northern France are the Luftwaffe's personal slaughterhouse. On the ground in the command bunker of the night fighter base, the mood is one of surgical efficiency. The Luftwaffe female auxiliaries, the Blitzmädel, move markers on a giant frosted glass map. They wear headsets, listening to data streams from coastal radars. The bomber stream is a red snake crawling across the map towards the east, but the snake is fragmenting. The target isn't a deep industrial city. The snake is coiling over them. The air raid siren sounds. It is a wailing sound, rising and falling, penetrating the bones. But Vogel doesn't run to a shelter. He runs to his plane. This is the insanity of the air war over the airfields. The bombers are coming to destroy the runway. The only way to save the fighters is to take off before the bombs fall, to launch into the raid. Vogel climbs onto the wing of the Ju-88. His mechanics are pulling the chocks. The runway lights are on, a suicidal necessity. They are illuminated for 10 seconds to allow takeoff, then extinguished. In those 10 seconds, the base is a beacon, a target painted in light. MacDonald sees it. From 20,000 feet, through a break in the clouds, he sees the strings of pearls on the ground, the runway lights. "Target visual," says the bomb aimer, lying prone in the nose blister. Bomb doors open. The hydraulics whine. The Lancaster drags, slowing down as the doors disrupt the airflow. They are sitting ducks now, straight and level for the bomb run. The most terrifying 30 seconds in warfare. You cannot evade, you cannot corkscrew, you have to fly into the teeth of the flak and hold the line. Steady, steady, left, left. The voice of the bomb aimer is calm, detached. It's a facade. Below them, Vogel's Ju-88 is rolling down the runway. He is racing the falling bombs. It is a duel of physics. Gravity pulling the cookie down versus the BMW radial engines pulling the fighter up. If Vogel takes off too late, the shockwave of the bombs will smash his plane into the ground like a swatting hand. If he takes off in time, he will be airborne, armed, and right in the middle of the bomber stream that just tried to kill him. "Bombs gone," says the aimer. The Lancaster leaps upward, relieved of its burden. Camera rolling. They have to fly straight for another 10 seconds to take the photo, the proof of destruction. MacDonald fights the urge to bank the plane. He holds the line. And then the earth below erupts. The 4,000-pounder hits the intersection of the main runways. A flash of white light, brighter than the sun, followed by a shockwave that they can feel even at this altitude. It is a hammer blow to the fuselage. The airfield is swallowed by dust and fire. But in the chaos, a shadow detaches itself from the inferno, a shape rising from the flames, climbing steeply. Vogel made it. He is airborne. The raid didn't kill the wasps. It just kicked the nest. And now the wasps are angry, they are airborne, and they are behind the Canadians. The waste of bombers is about to become a desperate fight for survival in a burning sky. The sky above Sint-Truiden ceases to be an airspace and becomes a tank of frenzied sharks. The physics of aerial combat changes instantly. Until seconds ago, the threat was impersonal. Flak, mathematical explosions fired by gunners who didn't see their targets. Now the threat has a name, a face, and a predatory intent. The Lancaster V for vengeance levels off at 18,000 feet, Merlin engines screaming to gain speed, but speed is an illusion. For a Ju-88 night fighter, a Lancaster flying at 240 miles per hour is a stationary object. It is a cow grazing on a railroad track waiting for the train. Inside the cockpit, Flight Lieutenant MacDonald fights the thermal turbulence caused by the flames rising from the airfield below. The air smells of ozone and terror. "Navigator, give me a vector out of this hell now," shouts MacDonald. Campbell, hunched over his chartboard lit by a dim amber bulb, traces a line with a shaking grease pencil. "Vector 270, Mac, heading for the coast. But the stream is scattered. We're alone." Alone. The most terrifying word in the Bomber Command vocabulary. Safety is in the herd, in the combat box, in the mass of metal that confuses enemy radar. An isolated bomber is an invitation to slaughter, and they are not just isolated, they are being hunted by an expert who just watched his home get bombed. Heinrich Vogel levels his Ju-88 at 15,000 feet, 300 meters below the bomber layer. He isn't looking outside. Visual darkness is irrelevant. He is looking at the phosphorescent green glow of his Liechtenstein SN2 radar. The radar operator, Feldwebel Hans Müller, sitting right behind him, whispers coordinates like a lover reciting macabre poetry. Contact, 11 o'clock, range 2 kilometers, height 300 meters above. On the radar, the Lancaster is not a plane with 7 men, mothers, sons, and fears. It is a blip, a smudge of electrons. Vogel adjusts the throttle. The BMW 801 engines swallow the rich fuel mixture. The fighter rises from the depths like a leviathan coming up for air. He won't attack from behind. The Lancaster's tail has a turret with 4 .303 caliber machine guns. Though light weapons, they can blind a pilot or puncture a radiator. Vogel is a professional. He takes no unnecessary risks. He will use the Schräger Musik. He slides his fighter into the deadliest position in air warfare, directly beneath the bomber's belly. The Lancaster has no ventral turret. It is an architectural blind spot, a 30-square-meter Achilles heel. Vogel looks up through the glass canopy of his cockpit. He sees the black silhouette of the bomber blocking the stars. It is massive. He can see the engine exhausts glowing blue. He can see the bomb bay doors closed. He is so close that if he reached out, he feels he could touch the soot-stained metal of the enemy. He feels no hate. He feels the cold satisfaction of an engineer who has just aligned a complex equation. He places the aiming reticle over the root of the Lancaster's right wing, exactly where the main fuel tanks are located. He doesn't need to pull the plane's nose up. The 20mm cannons behind his head are already angled 70 degrees upwards. He pulls the trigger. For the crew of the Lancaster, Q for Queenie, flying 500 meters to McDonald's starboard, death arrives without warning. There are no traces. Vogel uses mixed high-explosive and incendiary ammunition, but without bright phosphorus. Invisibility is his armor. The first sign that something is wrong is the sound, not a shot, but a tearing, as if a giant were ripping a steel sheet. The 20mm shells punch through the wing spar, shred the aluminum, and detonate inside the number 2 fuel tank. Physics takes command. The high-octane gasoline vapor ignites instantly. It's not a fire, it's a detonation. The right wing of Q for Queenie separates from the fuselage in a blinding flash of white light. The bomber, suddenly transformed into an unbalanced monoblock, enters a violent terminal spin. Inside V for Vengeance, MacDonald is blinded by the flash. "Christ almighty!" screams Ross in the rear turret. "Queenie's gone! They got Queenie!" MacDonald looks to the right and sees the horror etched onto the retina of the night. The neighboring Lancaster isn't falling, it is disintegrating. It is a rain of burning aluminum. He sees the fuselage spinning like a broken toy, flames engulfing the cabin where 7 men he had breakfast with, men whose laughter he heard on the transport truck 3 hours ago, are being incinerated or crushed by the centrifugal force preventing them from reaching the escape hatches. There are no parachutes. There is no time. The plane hits the Belgian ground 10 seconds later, creating a crater of fire that rivals the bombs they just dropped. The psychological shock in the cabin of V for Vengeance is palpable, a wave of collective nausea. Campbell, the pragmatic navigator, stops writing for a second. His hand trembles, the pencil tapping on the board. "Didn't see where it came from," whispers Ross over the intercom, his voice rising an octave, bordering on hysteria. "Didn't see traces, Mac? Nothing. It just blew up." This is what terrifies. Invisible death. Death that comes from below. MacDonald knows what it is. He's heard the rumors, upward-firing cannons, jazz music. He knows the fighter is still out there, and he knows that now that Queenie is gone, he is the next item on the menu. Rage floods MacDonald, a hot, corrosive anger against command, against Harris, against the idiotic strategy. They attacked a runway, killed a piece of concrete. In exchange, Bomber Command just lost 7 highly trained crewmen and a complex machine. The trade feels obscene. "Keep your eyes peeled," roars MacDonald, forcing his voice to sound authoritative, trying to anchor his crew who are drifting into panic. "Mid-upper, watch the sky. Bomb aimer, look down. Engineer, watch those engine gauges. If the temperature spikes, we're dead." Vogel, orbiting the burning wreckage of his first victim, feels the vibration of success. But the night is young, and he still has ammunition. The fire on the ground illuminates the sky above, creating perfect silhouettes for him. He sees another Lancaster, V for Vengeance. It is trying to run, zigzagging. Vogel smiles. The zigzag is useless against radar. He pushes the throttle. The Ju-88 leaps forward. The hunter chooses his angle. This time, he decides to vary. He will attack the rear engines to see if he can set the fuselage on fire slowly, forcing the crew to bail out. Vogel isn't a sadist, but Luftwaffe intelligence pays well for captured aircrew. Interrogations yield information on radar frequencies and tactics. He approaches. Miller sings the distance. 1,000 meters, 800, he is turning left. Vogel compensates. He is entering the kill zone, but this time chance intervenes, or perhaps the sharpened survival instinct of a 19-year-old boy. In the rear turret of the Lancaster, Junior Ross is scanning the sky with his eyes desperate. He isn't looking up at the stars. He is looking down into the darkness of the ground, and he sees something. Not the plane itself, but an absence of stars, a shadow darker than the night, moving against the faint sheen of a river below. And then a tiny glint, the exhaust of the Ju-88. "Fighter, down, 6 o'clock, corkscrew left, go!" The scream tears through MacDonald's headphones. He doesn't hesitate. The reaction is muscular, not cerebral. He kicks the left rudder pedal to the stop and throws the yoke to the front left corner. The Lancaster, a metal whale, responds with a violence that defies its engineering. It rolls and dives simultaneously. The corkscrew maneuver is the most brutal physical experience a bomber crew can endure. G-force crushes MacDonald against the seat. His blood drains from his head. Vision turns grey. The plane groans, rivets popping under the torsional stress. Inside the fuselage, anything not bolted down, maps, thermoses, loose cartridges, becomes a lethal missile. Campbell is thrown against his table, breaking his nose on the compass. The bomb aimer in the nose is pressed against the plexiglass, watching the Earth spin madly before him. Vogel is caught by surprise. He was about to fire. The target disappears from his sights, plummeting to the left like a stone. He pulls the stick to follow, but the Ju-88 is faster. It overshoots the Lancaster, passing dangerously close to the bomber's wing. For a fraction of a second, Ross in the rear turret sees the enemy fighter whiz by, black crosses visible in the moonlight. He squeezes the triggers. The 4 Browning machine guns roar. Tracers streak the night, searching for the fighter. Most miss, but some hit the Ju-88's tail. Sparks fly. Vogel curses, fighting the stick as his rudder loses effectiveness. He dives to the right, disappearing into the darkness to lick his wounds and reassess. MacDonald levels the Lancaster at 12,000 feet. Everyone's breathing on the intercom is a chorus of desperate gasps. "Damage?" asks MacDonald. "I'm bleeding," says Campbell, "but the plane feels whole." "Saw bits of him fly off, Skip," says Ross, his voice trembling with euphoria and dread. "Think I hit the bastard." "Don't celebrate," cuts MacDonald. He has friends. They continue the flight west, the plane vibrating a little harder now, perhaps from the stress of the maneuver, perhaps from the pilot's paranoid imagination. They survived the encounter, but the mission isn't over, and the doubt persists, corrosive as acid. They almost died. Queenie died. Why? For holes in the ground? As V for Vengeance limps toward the English Channel, the narrative descends to the ground, to the epicenter of destruction at Sint Truiden. And it is here, in the mud and broken concrete, that the true nature of the waste of time begins to reveal itself, not as a mistake, but as a brutally effective strategy of attrition. The Oberst, colonel, commanding the base, emerges from his bunker. The air is unbreathable, thick with oil smoke and cement dust. He walks toward the main runway. It is unusable. Craters 6 meters deep dot the asphalt. But the Oberst isn't worried about the runway. He has battalions of forced laborers, Russian prisoners and Belgian civilians, ready with shovels and quick-setting cement. In 12 hours, the runway will be flat. He smiles with disdain. The Allies are fools. But then his adjutant runs up to him, face grey with soot and fear. "Herr Oberst, and the fuel depot." The colonel's smile vanishes. He looks to the northern sector of the base. There is no fire there, just darkness. "What about the depot?" "They didn't hit the big tanks, sir. They hit the transfer pumps, and the electrical substation feeding the pumps." The colonel feels a chill in his stomach that has nothing to do with the night. Without high-pressure electric pumps, they cannot refuel the fighters quickly. They will have to use hand pumps barrel by barrel. The turnaround time, the time to refuel and rearm a Ju-88, will go from 30 minutes to 4 hours. And there is more. The adjutant continues, voice faltering. "And the radar calibration shed. A direct hit. All the technicians dead, and the SN2 test equipment destroyed." The colonel stops. He looks at the smoking wreckage. Suddenly, the crater in the runway seems irrelevant. The runway can be fixed, but the technicians specialized in calibrating the sensitive night fighter radars. They cannot be replaced by slave laborers. The precision fuel pumps, they have to come from Berlin, and the railways are cut. Sint-Truiden base still has planes. It still has pilots. But it has lost its nervous system. The next night, when the bombers return, Vogel and his colleagues will still be able to take off, but they will take off slower, with uncalibrated radars flying blind. The deadly efficiency of the Zame Sao will drop by 10%, maybe 20%. Multiply that by 63 airfields attacked that night. It wasn't an attack on geography, it was an attack on logistics. It was an attack on time. In the sky, MacDonald doesn't know this. He only knows his friend is dead. He only knows the cold is coming in through a crack in the side window, and the way home is long. He looks at the instrument panel. The oil pressure gauge for engine number 3 is fluttering. "Engineer," he says, voice weary. "Watch number 3. Think we pushed it too hard in the dive." The engine is leaking. A thin trail of black oil is being sucked into the vacuum of the night, coating the wing. If the engine seizes, they lose speed. If they lose speed, they drop out of formation, or what's left of it. And if they drop out of formation, the shark still hungry on the Dutch coast will smell blood. The waste of bombers might have justified its existence strategically on the ground, but for the crew of V Vengeance, the bill is still open, and the collector is waiting in the next cloud. The silence on the intercom is heavy. No one talks about Queenie. No one talks about the maneuver. They are all locked in their own islands of trauma. Campbell wipes blood from his nose with the sleeve of his flight jacket. He looks at the map. "Enemy coast in 10 minutes, Mac," he says. Then the North Sea. The North Sea. Freezing, dark, unforgiving water. If they ditch there, hypothermia kills in 5 minutes. It's a cruel choice. Burn in the sky or freeze in the sea. "Copy," says MacDonald. He adjusts the trim. The plane is heavy on one side. The oil keeps leaking. And out there in the darkness, the pale moonlight reflects off the cockpit plexiglass, creating ghosts that dance in the pilot's peripheral vision, constant reminders that survival is merely a postponement, never a guarantee. The Dutch coast recedes, not as a triumph, but as a fading grey line of hostility. They are leaving the Happy Valley, the flak belt, the hunting ground of the night fighters. But the relief that should wash over the crew of V for Vengeance is strangled in the crib. The North Sea lies ahead, a black, churning void that stretches for 300 miles between them and the tea and toast of the Yorkshire mess hall. The ocean is not neutral territory. In the folklore of Bomber Command, the sea is the cold storage. It is where damaged planes go to vanish, and V for Vengeance is damaged. The vibration is no longer a hum. It is a shudder, a Parkinsonian tremor that rattles the airframe. MacDonald fights the yoke. The Lancaster wants to roll to the right, towards the wounded wing, towards the leaking engine. It requires constant, exhausting muscular pressure on the left rudder pedal to keep them flying straight. His leg is burning with lactic acid, shaking uncontrollably. "How are we looking on fuel, Red?" MacDonald asks, his voice tight. Campbell doesn't answer immediately. The silence stretches for 5 seconds, an eternity. "We're bleeding it, Mac. That maneuver cost us. And with the drag from the starboard side, it's going to be tight, very tight." Then the inevitable happens. Physics demands its due. The oil pressure needle on engine number 3, which had been fluttering like a dying moth, drops to 0. The temperature gauge spikes into the red. "Feathering number 3, screams the flight engineer, his hand darting to the overhead panel. He hits the button, but the propeller doesn't feather. Ideally, the blades should turn edge-on to the wind to slice through the air with minimal resistance. Instead, the mechanism damaged by the G-forces or shrapnel jams. The propeller begins to windmill. It becomes a giant air brake, a spinning disk of drag that pulls the right wing back as if a giant hand has grabbed it. The engine, starved of oil but forced to turn by the wind, begins to tear itself apart. Metal shrieks against metal. A piston rod shatters, punching through the engine casing. "Fire, starboard inner!" shouts Ross from the tail. He can see the sparks, the lick of flame vomiting from the cowling. "Extinguisher gone!" the engineer yells. He pulls the fire handle. A cloud of methyl bromide floods the engine nacelle. The flames flicker and die, suffocated, but the damage is done. The engine is dead. a dead weight of 2,000 pounds hanging off the wing, creating a turbulent wake that destroys the lift. The Lancaster drops. They lose 500 feet in seconds, then another 500. "Jettison," commands MacDonald. "Anything loose. Get it out, now." This is the humiliation of the wounded bomber. To survive, it must cannibalize itself. The crew begins a frantic harvest of weight. The bomb-aimer crawls back from the nose. He grabs the heavy camera, the one meant to prove the destruction of the airfield, and drags it to the escape hatch. He kicks it out. It falls into the sea, taking the proof of their waste of time with it. Campbell gathers his sextant, his heavy books of tables, the flare pistol. Out. The engineer rips the armor plating off the pilot's seat back. Out. But the altimeter continues to unwind. 12,000 feet. 10,000. The heavier air down here offers more lift, but it also creates more drag. The math isn't working. They are too heavy. MacDonald looks at the throttle quadrant. He has to push the remaining 3 engines to emergency power to maintain altitude. That burns fuel at a catastrophic rate. It's a cruel calculus. Fly fast and run out of gas over the sea, or fly slow and sink into the waves. "Guns," says MacDonald. The word hangs in the cold air. To dump the guns is to castrate the plane. It is to declare that they are no longer warriors, just survivors. "Junior, strip the rear turret. Throw the ammo. Throw the Brownings." There is a pause. For a tail gunner, his guns are his religion. They are the only thing between him and the abyss. "You sure, Skip?" Ross asks, his voice small. "Do it, or we swim," MacDonald snaps. Ross obeys. He opens the turret doors to the slipstream. The wind howls, a banshee scream that drowns out the engines. He disconnects the ammo belts. Yards of .303 caliber bullets snake out into the night, glittering like silver eels before vanishing. Then he unlocks the breeches. The heavy machine guns, oil-slicked and hot, are heaved overboard. The mid-upper gunner does the same. With each splash they can't hear, the Lancaster feels a fraction lighter, a fraction more willing to fly. They stabilize at 6,000 feet. The air is thicker here, richer. The 3 engines growl, drinking fuel voraciously. The cabin is freezing. The heating system works off the engines, and with the disruption, the temperature plummets. Ice forms on the inside of the plexiglass. Condensation from their breath turns to snow dust. They are silent now. The frantic activity is over. Now there is only the waiting, the long walk home. This is the part of the mission that breaks men. The combat is adrenaline, the return is endurance. MacDonald's arms are leaden. He has to trim the aircraft constantly, fighting the yaw caused by the dead engine and the windmilling prop. He hallucinates. Fatigue is a narcotic. He sees shapes in the clouds. He sees a mountain ahead where there should be only ocean. He shakes his head, slapping his own face to stay awake. He thinks about the airfield they bombed, the craters. Was it worth it? Was it worth Queenie? Was it worth this slow torture? Campbell breaks the silence. "Mac, I'm picking up a signal, IFF transponder, it's faint. Identification, friend or foe. Is it a fighter? No, it's slow, it's low, it's ahead of us." A ghost, another straggler. Through the gloom, MacDonald sees it. A shadow against the whitecaps of the waves. It's a Halifax bomber, another Canadian plane from a different squadron. It's in worse shape than they are. It's flying on 2 engines. It's dragging its tail, skimming the water at 500 feet. Smoke is trailing from its fuselage. It's a dying animal trying to reach its lair. They pass over it slowly. There is no radio contact. The Halifax is silent. Perhaps the radio is dead. Perhaps the crew is dead or incapacitated. The plane flown by a ghost pilot on autopilot. MacDonald feels a surge of irrational kinship. "Come on, mate," he whispers. "Keep her up." But as he watches, the Halifax dips a wing. Just a tip. It touches a wave. At 150 miles per hour, water is concrete. The Halifax cartwheels. It doesn't explode. It simply shatters. The fuselage snaps. The tail breaks off. Great plumes of white spray rise up, swallowing the machine. In 10 seconds, it is gone. No parachutes, no dinghies, just a slick of oil and debris. The North Sea has claimed another toll. MacDonald looks away. He feels bile rise in his throat. That is their future if the fuel runs out. Red, time to coast? 40 minutes, Mac, if the wind holds. 40 minutes. Engine number 2 is running hot now, laboring to compensate for its dead brother. The vibration is getting worse. A rivet pops on the canopy frame, pinging off the glass like a bullet. The aircraft is shedding its skin. They are flying a wreck. And then, the ultimate irony. The radio crackles to life. It's not a distress call. It's the BBC. The radio operator, bored or delirious, has tuned into the home service. A cheerful, crackly voice is reading the late-night news. Allied bombers struck targets in the Low Countries last night. Preliminary reports indicate light resistance. Light resistance. MacDonald wants to laugh, but it would sound like a sob. Light resistance. He saw Queenie explode. He saw the Halifax drown. He is flying a plane that is shaking itself to pieces. The disconnect between the sanitized war on the radio and the visceral war in the cockpit is a chasm that can never be bridged. This is the waste of bombers reality. Nameless death in the dark, summarized as a footnote in a bulletin between a cricket score and a weather forecast. Suddenly, the engineer taps MacDonald's shoulder. He points out the window. Landfall. It's not the white cliffs of Dover. It's the low, muddy smear of the East Anglian coast. But to them it looks like Eden. They have crossed the void. But crossing the coast brings a new danger. They are low. They are off course. They are a large, unidentified aircraft approaching Britain from the east. The British anti-aircraft batteries are trigger-happy. Nervous gunners shoot first and ask questions later. "Fire the colours of the day," MacDonald orders. "Do we have any flares left?" Campbell freezes. He threw the flare pistol out. He jettisoned their ID. I tossed it, Mac. You said throw everything." Silence. They are flying into friendly airspace, looking like an intruder. If a searchlight grabs them, the Home Guard might finish what Vogel started. MacDonald keys the radio, switching to the emergency frequency. "Darky. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is Victor Vengeance. Damaged. 3 engines. No IFF. Approaching coast. Don't shoot, for Christ's sake, don't shoot." Static. Then a voice, a British voice, calm, bored, beautiful. "Victor Vengeance, we have you on plot. Squawk is silent, but we see you limping. You are cleared direct to Manston. Emergency runway is lit. Ambulance standing by." Manston. The crash landing strip on the coast of Kent. A massive wide runway built exactly for cripples like them. MacDonald feels the tension snap. His body goes limp. But the plane has one last trick. As he pulls back the throttle to descend, the fuel starvation hits engine number 1. It coughs and dies. Now they are on 2 engines, both on the left side. Asymmetrical thrust becomes critical. The plane yaws violently to the right, towards the dead wing. MacDonald has no strength left in his leg to hold the rudder. The Lancaster rolls. The horizon tilts vertical. They are falling out of the sky over the safety of England. "Help me!" MacDonald screams to the engineer. The flight engineer throws himself across the cockpit, grabbing the yoke, pushing his feet onto the rudder pedals alongside MacDonald's. 4 legs, 4 arms, fighting 30 tons of metal and gravity. They wrestle the nose up. The ground rushes up to meet them. Hedgerows, cottages, sheep, all flashing by in a blur of grey. They see the runway lights of Manston, a glittering necklace of salvation, but they are too high and too fast. They have no flaps. The hydraulic system for the flaps was powered by the number 3 engine. They are coming in hot. A landing without flaps means landing at 160 miles per hour instead of 100. The tires might burst. The undercarriage might collapse. "Brace! Brace! Brace!" yells MacDonald. He cuts the remaining engines. The silence is sudden and terrifying. The only sound is the wind rushing over the canopy. The wheels touch the tarmac. Smoke screeches from the rubber. The bomber bounces. Once, twice. It slams down hard. The right gear leg, weakened by the landing, snaps. The right wing drops. The dead propellers strike the concrete, sparks showering the fuselage like a grandiose firework display. The Lancaster skids sideways, grinding, shrieking, tearing itself apart as it slides off the runway and into the mud. It spins 180 degrees and comes to a halt. Silence. Then, the ticking of cooling metal, the smell of wet grass and hot aluminum. "Out! Everybody out!" MacDonald commands. They scramble through the roof hatch, sliding down the fuselage, falling into the English mud. They run. They expect the fire. They expect the explosion. But V for Vengeance just sits there, broken, smoking, but not burning. They stop 50 yards away, panting, heaving. They are alive. They look back at their machine. It looks like a dinosaur carcass. Campbell falls to his knees and vomits. Ross starts laughing, a high-pitched manic sound that is more disturbing than the vomiting. MacDonald just stands there. He checks his watch. The mission took 5 hours and 40 minutes. It felt like a decade. A jeep approaches, headlights cutting through the mist. An RAF police corporal jumps out. "You lot all right?" he asks, looking at the ragged, oil-stained scarecrows. "We're alive," MacDonald says. "Did we hit the target?" the corporal asks, eager for gossip. "Did you smash 'em?" MacDonald looks at the corporal, then at the wreck of his plane, then at the empty sky where Queenie and the Halifax vanished. "We made some holes in the ground," he says, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "We made some holes in the dirt." The corporal nods, satisfied. "Good show, sir. Good show." He doesn't understand. He can't. He doesn't know that the real target wasn't the concrete. It was the attrition. And tonight, the attrition worked both ways. The Canadians paid the butcher's bill. But as MacDonald climbs into the jeep, he doesn't yet know what the Germans found in the wreckage of their own airfield. The captured reports that would eventually turn this waste into a grim justification. That revelation is waiting for the dawn.